Hello and welcome to Late Bloomers. Today I have a very special guest on. Her name is Anna Villarreal, and she had her first baby at 38, correct?
Yeah, I was just a month away from being 38.
Oh my goodness. And so Anna has had the experience of getting to experience her life, all of her 20s, all of her 30s, and then decided to become a mom. And I'm really excited to dive into that story and to hear how Anna came to that decision, her little bit of her life journey, and then just to see what nuggets that we can glean for ourselves. So, Anna, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. So, please tell me a little bit about you and your story. But let's start with, did you always know that you wanted kids, or is that a decision that you came to later?
It's funny. It's a little bit of a decision that I flip-flopped on. I got married really young, and I got married at 20, and I thought I wanted to be a young mom, and I went through a lot of changes. My When I was 22, I was about to move to Italy with my ex-husband, and unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with cancer and passed away very quickly. And after his death, I kind of realized like I wasn't ready for kids. I wanted to still do a lot of things before I became a mom. And slowly through the course of my marriage, I realized I don't think I wanted kids. It was very strange. And in retrospect, I think I just didn't want kids with my ex-husband. And I, went on, and after I lived in Italy with him, and then we came back to the States. I went back to school. I just realized like I had so much life to live, and I wasn't ready. Like, despite living in Europe for 3 years and traveling with my ex-husband, like I still wanted a lot of things for myself. I wanted a career. I wanted to figure out who I was. And I remember even within the times I was getting divorced, I was like, I just don't feel like I could be a good partner to anyone because I didn't know who I was. And so I went back to school, and I studied physical therapy, and it was actually kind of very odd. It was a huge pivot for me because I had started going to school for business, and then I took care of my dad when he was sick, and I realized I just had this huge aptitude for the medical field. And even I remember the nurses asking me, like, are you a medical student? Because like I just knew my dad's chart like forwards and backwards. And I also got really, really into working out. At the time that I moved overseas, I had gotten very, very overweight. And I really wanted to take control of my health. So I started working out, exercising, dieting, and I got really into it. And I remember I had this really great job where I did financial counseling at the base, that kind of went along with like my business, degree. And it was funny because I remember when I left, nobody, like my boss was very awkward, and she had everybody sit around the room, and they're like, everybody give us one great memory about Anna. Nobody had a single thing to say about my work. No one had a single thing to say about like, oh, you're such a great mentor, or you're so good at like keeping us all motivated at work. It was all, Anna, you're always organizing a run or making us go work out or making us go swim. And I was just like, I remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, I think I'm in the wrong career. And so that's when I got into physical therapy. And even when I was in school, I was in a very serious relationship, and my partner we bought a house, he wanted to have kids. And I was just like, I just got my degree. Like, I want to go explore and see what's out there. And, having worked on bases most of my adult life, I knew that I wanted to get back into the federal system. And I remember even telling, my school counselors, I was like, I think I want to go work federally. And they're like, that's going to be really difficult. It's really difficult to get those jobs. And so I was like, well, that sounds like a great goal. So I had a job. I had a really great job in Virginia where I graduated from PTA school. And I just decided, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to move back to California. I had lived in California for a while, before moving to Italy. I had a good group of friends out there, and it just felt like home to me. So I moved out there without a job, and I got myself a job at the VA. And then I moved on and got a contract position at Balboa because it paid better. And man, I just really enjoyed my single life. I loved being, I loved having a job that I was proud of. I had a really great career as a PTA. I got to do some really cool stuff that most PTAs I feel don't get to do. I was a clinical instructor for the nursing staff there. I also did like safety programs there. I probably trained just about every corpsman that came out of their A school, coming through to be PT techs. And I was very proud of that. Like I really enjoyed teaching others. I really enjoyed, working in the military field because it had just been with my ex, like it had been such a community for me. So I felt very much at home there. But that being said, like I just had no interest in kids or a serious relationship really because I was so into myself. And at the time, I was also very much into bodybuilding.
Hmm.
I did a lot of bodybuilding.
Which is a huge commitment, right? That's a ton of
Huge.
time and effort and energy and tracking. Oh my goodness, yes.
It's so much work. And I used to tell everybody like it's such a selfish sport and it makes you very selfish. And and it's kind of like it's all about me. And I remember like
Like selfish or extremely goal oriented, right?
yeah, extremely goal oriented, but also
Yeah.
like I would turn down dates to go to the gym all the time. And people thought I was crazy, but I'm like, I'm just so like I'm so focused on getting better. I'm so focused on, this next show or this next like whatever.
Mhm.
It was such a I was so wrapped up in that. And I really loved being able to like come and go as I please. I traveled a lot with my friends at the time. Um, so I just really enjoyed life in California. And I was in kind of like the only relationship I really had out there was, prior to meeting my husband, was a very on and off relationship that wasn't very serious. And I knew it was never going to be serious. And I think that's why I was comfortable with it because I was like, I'm still not ready for any of that. But it's funny because I met my husband and I would tell everybody all the time, like, I don't think I want kids. I don't think I want kids because I was so wrapped up in me and my career. And I met my husband and it was just like he hit like every single check mark that I needed to say, like, I think this man would be a good dad. Like he just and I know everyone says this, but like it's like he reminded me so much of my own dad. And
Mm.
it's kind of crazy. Like he was responsible, he had his life together, he knew what he wanted, and he was able to do like he was able to be in conflict with me, but he was also very much interested in resolving conflict and not, just sitting in it and stewing. And I was like, well, I mean, I feel like this is what parenting would be like, is that you're always going to be, like, well, I think this, well, I think that, because everybody has their own, experience of what family means, of what childhood is, of what values are. And our values were also very, very similar, in the sense that we're both very, we're very open, we're very inclusive of people. He is agnostic, I'm Catholic, but it's not really like a wedge between us or anything. And we have very different upbringings, but it doesn't really seem to affect the way we raise our son, which is amazing.
Very
And
cool. So what I'm hearing is that he was more interested, like when you guys were in conflict, he's more interested in finding a solution and problem solving rather than winning
yeah,
or holding it over, right? Because
yeah,
I've definitely experienced like when you have some people in your world and they're more interested in winning the battle, right?
right.
Than winning the overall war, which is like how do we find a solution together? And it also makes it sound like he opened up a part of your heart that made it possible for you to even consider kids, whereas before you weren't in a space to consider it because you didn't have a partner that made it possible for you to open up your mind in that way. Am I misinterpreting or does that sound
No,
right?
no, that's very right. And I would even almost say, it's almost like I felt safe enough to have, to have a family with him, because I think
A
that's
big
kind of
deal.
the biggest things. Yeah, is that you need that stability, and you need a good example of that stability. And to kind of circle back to what you're saying about resolving conflict, I feel like I've learned so much from him because I was also the one that would always be like, no, we have to fight, like I have to win. And I'm still learning from him every day.
Yeah.
Like I feel like he has so much more patience than I'll ever have. um I'm the feisty one, he's kind of the calm one.
That's perfect though, right?
Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
works really well, especially with the baby. It works really well.
Yeah. And uh did we already say on here how old is your son?
He's 20 months old.
20 months, so just shy of 2 years old.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
We're definitely
great.
terrible twos though already.
Oh my goodness. They are real.
It's very real,
Were they?
and it tests you, and it tests your marriage, and it tests your patience. It just humbles you when they hit that age.
Yes, it does. So then you met your husband. Your heart opened up for the first time on being able to really consider the potential of having a family with somebody. But you're still, you're still very much into your career and you haven't slowed down yet. So when was that transition? Did you guys have a conversation about it? Did you start slowing down or opening up your world to make space for a baby? Like, how was that? And then what was the conversation you had both with yourself and with him?
I think that it we met in November of like COVID time, like 2020.
Yeah.
And it's just, we felt so comfortable with one another. I moved in. I remember, our mutual friend Rachel knows I moved in with him like really fast, like within a month or two. And she's like, but
And you know,
like, yeah. And I just felt so comfortable and
yeah.
safe and
Oh,
welcome in his home. And it just felt natural. And
oh,
we got engaged in August. And once we got engaged and, we had started, talking about like when we're getting married and how this is going to happen. He also had an upcoming deployment happening prior to us getting married. And realizing what our age was, we were just like, why don't we just start trying now? Because we were very worried about our timeline. Because at that time, I would think I was already 36. Yeah, I was already 36, and he was going to be gone for a whole 6 months, and we were like, we should really just start trying. And we started trying, and after, because it was a full year before he was leaving, and after a year of trying, we didn't get pregnant. We got a little bit worried. It was almost a year. I think it was like 9 months or something like that. But we were trying and not getting pregnant, and we decided to both just get a workup like after a few, because we were like, I don't know, I think we were just so excited about the idea.
yeah.
Um and but it was a little bit rough because I was sort of, I think I was still in that very independent phase, and we talked about IVF, and it was very difficult for me to think about IVF because coming from the medical field, it sounded so invasive. It sounded so difficult. And at one point, we were told, like, no, I'm sorry, like, you guys are going to have IVF. Like, it's just not going to work. And it was very difficult to kind of process that. And so at that point, he's getting ready to go. And he's like, I think you should just start the IVF process while I'm gone. And I was like, I don't know. It was that was a little bit of friction because I don't think he understood what IVF entails, that, you're going to be sedated. Like, I really can't do this alone. And in San Diego, sure, I had friends, but I didn't have any family there. And at that point, he had decided that he was no longer going to stay in the Navy. So we were also transitioning to civilian life. We were going to move across the country for his new job. There was just a lot of things happening. And I said to him, I think you should go finish deployment. And once we, finish the wedding, because then we have the wedding coming up too. I'm like, then we can go to Florida. And once we get to Florida, find doctors and get this all taken care of. But it was very emotional because he was so ready. Like, I think he had been waiting a lot longer than I have. I think he knew he always wanted kids. He
Mm-hmm.
just was waiting for the right partner. Whereas I was waiting for the right partner to decide if I wanted kids. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, I got my partner. I'm happy. Okay, kids can come. But for him, it was like, okay, kids.
Yeah.
And I think guys are a little, it's funny because the more I speak to other friends that have had kids as they're older, it's like the guys that are more excited to have the kids, is what it seems like. And I
My
definitely,
husband was ready years before I was.
I know it's
Yeah,
fun.
and which was so funny. So like it was hard for him, because he always wanted to have kids, but he decided that he would rather keep me as a partner, knowing that at the time I was on the like never having kids. That was my that was what I had told people for years. And so I'm very, very grateful he stuck around. But that is interesting, right? That sometimes the men in our lives are like, yes, I just got to find the right partner and I'm ready and I'm going to commit to this. And you sometimes I think we think that it's usually women that are pushing for kids, but not always.
No, and it's funny too because even like I was like, okay, yeah, I think I could have kids with this man. That sounds like it would be really amazing. And I didn't realize how attached I was to that idea even until we were told like this might not happen for you. And then it became more real. Like, no, I really want kids with this person.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were neighbors with one of his cousins, and they just found out that they got pregnant after we got the news that we couldn't have kids. And they were like the same age as us, and we were like, oh my God, like that really affected both of us to find out that they were pregnant again. It was like, but we were also very happy for them. But
Of course.
it was just like, it just hit me so much harder. And then I started to realize, like, no, this is something I really want, you know? And like I said, it was difficult, but we, decided we'll wait, we'll take a step back because we had so many things that we had to take care of prior to moving to Florida and our wedding that I was like, it's going to be impossible. And then you're going to have me pregnant at our wedding. And I'm like, it's going to be a lot. And so cut to, he, got back from deployment. And this was at the end of July. We moved to Florida. I want to say it was like the first week of October, right around there. So we got everything packed up and left. I quit my job and we moved out here. And the week of our wedding, we got married in Mexico. I got really sick. And I was like, and Ben was like, he's like, I think you're going to have to go to the doctor like before we go to Mexico because you can't fly like this. Like I was so sick. My stomach was killing me. I could barely eat. I was throwing up. And I really thought I got food poisoning at one of the places nearby. And he's like, you should just take a pregnancy test just to make sure. Cause I was like, no, I was like, I'm not even due for my period yet. Like it's fine. It's fine. And sure enough, we were pregnant. And but I think I don't know. I was like, I kind of feel like the timing was just perfect though, because I was like, I think about 6 weeks pregnant or so. We just barely found out. And it was perfect. We were in a space where we could be pregnant and enjoy it and not worry about like me working or anything like that. And it just felt like it was right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then also it sounds like when you like kind of when you guys have both kind of accepted, okay, we're just going to take a break and pull back and just try to do what we need to do for now. It happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it happened without any intervention.
Yeah. And I was like, it's probably the stress of even just trying to get pregnant that's probably affecting both of us,
I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I do wonder if that's a thing where there's so much pressure on you as you get older. They're like, if you don't do it now, you'll never be able to do it. And then you're going to the doctor and they're like, you can't do it without IVF. And then you're just like told all these stories about how hard it's going to be. And of course, you're going to believe it.
Right.
But I do wonder if, like, as soon as you guys were able to relax, your body was like, yeah, I'm in a good spot for this now.
Yeah. And it really was like divine intervention to have it all line up the way that it did.
Yeah.
And even before I left San Diego, like I was still working up until the very end. I left my hospital job, but I had started doing home health on the side. I just, of course,
you're going into people's homes, pregnant, taking care of them for physical therapy.
Yeah, no, but I was doing before I left San Diego, I was doing that, and I continued it. And when we got here, I was going to take my time to try to find a job and figure it all out, and we could afford for me not to work, but I was like, I'm going to work. Of course, I'm going to work. Like, why wouldn't I work? And yeah, like eventually it just became difficult being pregnant and trying to work. It was too much because my immune system just took a dive and I would get sick every other week. And I'm like, I can't go see patients sick.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, and you were still what? You're still it's still like right around COVID time, right? Like just towards the tail end of it, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was probably, I mean, I think, well, we're in Florida, so it
Oh,
was, COVID
a
never
little
existed.
different attitude down there.
Yeah, COVID never existed here.
Yeah.
But I actually wound up getting COVID. That was one of the reasons that we were like, okay, maybe I
Mm.
step back and not do this, and wait till after we have him. And
Hmm.
I didn't have like a particularly difficult pregnancy or anything.
So that
But
would be kind of like my next. So definitely tell
yeah,
us about your experience with having COVID and what that was like. But that's what I would be curious about next is because now you're technically a geriatric pregnant person, right? So how was your pregnancy? I mean, was it, I would just be curious to know, what was it, did it, how did it feel? Like, how did mm, I guess your team, your medical team treat you? Did you see OBs? Did you see a midwife? Like, tell me a little bit about like your journey there. Because you're going in, starting out, and they're automatically saying, "Ooh, okay, so you're an older mom."
yeah. No,
What's that like?
and it was, it was interesting, especially in Florida. It was
Uh-huh.
very interesting. Um, so, obviously we were super excited that we were pregnant, and we were also a little bit worried because we were going to Mexico for our wedding. So I said to Ben, like, we need to find like a Planned Parenthood or something that can do like a quick, blood draw and figure out if I'm really pregnant, because we kind of just didn't believe it. We were in such shock. And this is Florida. There's no
Huh?
Planned Parenthoods here. I mean, there are, but they're very scattered, and we live kind of rural. So we found this place called the Early Pregnancy Center. And unbeknownst
Perfect.
unbeknownst to us, it's like this Christian organization that helps young moms find and connect to care in the community, and they try to steer you away from abortion, and they try to connect you with resources for adoption or care and whatever. So we went, and they were like, oh yeah, 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 we can get you guys a pregnancy test, no problem. And they were like, oh my gosh. And they calculated like how pregnant I was, and they were like, well, we can't do a blood test, and we won't do an ultrasound until you're whatever weeks. We were like, okay, so we just did another P test, great.
Okay.
but but then we had to sit down for a lecture about not having abortions and Jesus, and it was very bizarre. It was such a bizarre experience. And we were like, no, 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 we're getting
You're like,
married. We want
that's
a
not
baby.
even on our radar right now.
And we were like, no, no, we're getting married like in 3 days. Like we want the baby. We just want to make sure we're, doing the right thing, when we go to Mexico and taking the right precautions traveling. Like we were just like, we're just in shock. Like we just wanted to verify this. It was so weird. So so then when we got back from Mexico, well, actually, before we went to Mexico, I have a good friend of mine who's a doula, and I called her, and it was like, I told my husband, I was like, I have to call somebody, like I have to figure out. I'm like, I don't know how to be pregnant. I need to figure out how to be pregnant. I was so freaked out. And so I called her. I was like, Jess, I'm pregnant. I don't know how to be pregnant. I have to go to Mexico, and then we're going to South Africa on our honeymoon, and I'm scared,
Oh
and I
my
was freaked
gosh.
out. Yeah, I was really freaked out, and I just wanted to make sure that nothing went wrong, that everything was, like that everything was okay, because we had struggled for so long to get pregnant. Like it was such a miracle for us that we just didn't want to do anything to put me at risk. And she was like, just take a deep breath, and she gave me a list of things to pack with me, for morning sickness and things to avoid. And because I mean, I don't know anything about being pregnant, nothing. I'd never read a book about being pregnant, nothing. And
Isn't
so
that funny?
yeah, and it's like a whole, you have to get a whole another education. And so when we got back, we got an appointment with our OB, and they set me out pretty far out, and I was like, I think they made me wait till I was 7. Yeah, they said like 7 weeks, I think. And then um but then when we showed up, they're like, you're way further along. Like I was already like 10 weeks by the time that they checked me out. I was. And it was funny because I had a false period. So,
Oh yeah.
or like
Yeah.
implantation. bleeding or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we had no idea I was pregnant for a while. Like
Yep.
we think we might have arrived to Florida pregnant. We're not sure.
How funny.
Yeah.
But that
So
does happen, doesn't it? Where you're just like, oh,
you
okay.
had no clue.
Yeah.
No. And I mean the OBs they were pretty nice initially. We liked our doctor initially. And then we found out like, oh, you're gonna see a different OB every time you're here. And that felt very I don't know, it just didn't feel right to me. And like I have to give everyone my information all over again.
Right.
And what was worse is that, I remember my husband came to a couple of the first appointments with me, and we met one of the new OBs, and she literally made me go through my whole chart again. And it
Oh.
was it's so frustrating because it's like, well, why didn't you check my chart? Like why like it just felt like I was just another,
Well, and as a provider yourself, you know how to check a chart.
Mhm.
So you know like how to do a chart review, and go in there, and then you can go in and say, hey, just so you know, I want to let you know I read this, and this about you. So this is
Right.
what I know from the chart. What is it that you need me to understand? And that way you're not going in, saying, well, my name is this, I got
Yeah.
pregnant here, versus like, thank you so much. And then you can actually start a conversation at a more advanced point versus starting all over again and really,
Right.
to be honest, not being very respectful of your time.
No, not being respectful of my time. And it just, like I said, we live in a small area. So I think that this particular group
Yeah.
see most of the patients in the area. So they're very overwhelmed. And it just felt like they just can't give personalized care. It was very
Sure.
frustrating. And
Sure. I'm sure they're busy, right? As most physicians are. They're so busy and their documentation burden is so heavy. But it
right,
doesn't but it just still doesn't, I mean, giving them grace, because I think that's really important, and also being on the patient end saying it just doesn't feel like I'm getting personalized care as much.
yeah.
And we can absolutely blame it on their inability because they're so swamped. But it doesn't make you feel better.
It doesn't make you feel better, and it doesn't
Yeah.
make you feel like you can trust them either because you're
Right.
just another person in their day, and it's
Right.
something, so it's just such a big deal, that
Hmm.
your pregnancy to somebody. And we had some questions because at that point when I met the second provider, I was probably close to like 20, I was close to 20 weeks because they wanted me to see a maternal fetal specialist, not only
Why? What was
because,
the reason?
well, they had two reasons. They had two valid reasons.
Okay.
I wouldn't say both of them were valid, but one was because of my age, they wanted to do that. But also, I had back in, I think it was like 2013, I had a LEAP procedure. So
Okay.
there had been um there had been some concern as to whether or not I could have a natural delivery because of it.
Right.
And
Like, was
so
your cervix compromised? That sort of
yeah.
thing, right?
And honestly, that was the main reason I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. Let's do
Sure.
this.
Right.
Um, and we did that, but we also had a lot of questions about it, and they just felt very dismissive. Like, like what would happen if, like they say I can't, like, and they were just like, well, she's like, you're gonna have to wait and see. You're gonna have to wait and see. They couldn't give me like any, worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, like anything for me to consider because as a new mom, your mind goes everywhere, and they were very dismissive to our questions about that. So that felt like very much strike one with us with this
Hmm.
group. Um and then we came back to the practice after I did see the maternal fetal specialist because I had to do two checkups with her, and everything was fine. He was growing beautifully. They said there was no issue with my cervix, that they believed that I could deliver naturally, no problem. And we went back, and so I was a little further along at this point, and we started to ask them about, as I was pregnant, like I got to reading and understanding more about like the process of delivery and everything. And um, they were telling me, okay, so because of your age, you're gonna reach, once you reach 39 weeks, we'll take a look at you and decide if we need to do an induction. And then we'll decide if we need to do a C-section. And I'm like, wait, why at 39 weeks? I couldn't understand it. And I was like, I'm like, but if I'm at 39 weeks, like I'm not even like I could go another week. And he's like, yeah, but
If
we're
not
not.
more, right?
Yeah,
Some women deliver a little later.
yeah,
Not always 40 weeks like on the dot. So,
no, no. And then there was so many questions about like my actual conception date because I had that rogue period in
right.
between.
Like
So,
what if you were actually, earlier in your pregnancy,
but
which is possible, right? You could be within, I'm sure, a week or two.
right. And so they started talking to us about that. And my husband happened to be there. And it was the first doctor that we really liked. And so we were a little bit like, wait a minute, like, what do you mean? Like, we're gonna have to decide like a C-section or induction at 39 weeks. And I told my husband, I'm like, because we had hired a doula at that point, and because we just decided like we don't know enough about being pregnant. Like, I think this is going to be our best case scenario to have someone help guide us through the delivery process. And she was so wonderful. She was so wonderful. And it's
Doulas are amazing. I like
they're
they,
such a great resource.
oh my gosh. I mean, I would shout it from the rooftops. I totally agree. Like you just need somebody who knows what's going on, being your advocate, and just knowing that they're on your team.
Well, yeah, and I think the bigger thing for us was that we don't have any family here.
Yeah.
So we wanted to feel like not just for myself, but that Ben had support in the delivery room as well. Like I think a lot of people don't realize how much the dads also need that hand, you know? And so we got very worried that they were going to push us into um delivering early. And what was very frustrating is that, yes, I had gained a significant amount of weight during my pregnancy. I gained overall 60 pounds, but I
Mhm.
stopped gaining weight at right around 6 months.
Mhm.
And my blood pressure never went over like 110 over 70. My
Perfect.
my blood sugar was perfect. I never had any issues. I literally was like the epitome of a healthy pregnancy. And they even told me at one point, they're like, you're healthier than most of our 20-year-olds. Those words came out of their mouths.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was so on top of it. Like my husband's aunt is also a great resource for us because she's a registered dietitian. And I was like, hey, like I want to do everything I can to make sure I'm getting all the proper nutrition, and I want to make sure that I can help, like minimize the risk of our baby developing allergies. And she sent me all these great resources for me to comb through. We really like design our life to make this the healthiest pregnancy possible. Like I bought a Peloton bike because I couldn't run anymore. Like, I mean, it was just all these things. Like I really wanted to be as healthy as possible during the pregnancy. And to then tell me like, oh, we're not going to give you the opportunity to deliver really upset me. And it was so funny because we got a little bit, it got a little bit heated at that appointment. And I remember the doctor then started combing through my chart, and he's like, remind me again, where you guys are from, California, right? And that felt so, it just felt so like, oh, of course you guys wouldn't want, an induction and a C-section. And he's like, and he said to me, he's like, I think you would be happier with a midwife. Yeah. And so I said, yeah, probably. And we fired them right then and there.
Oh my gosh. Remind me how many weeks you were at that point?
At this point, I was 30 weeks. Yeah,
So you're three-fourths the way through your pregnancy.
I know. So we fired them,
Holy moly.
and we went there's a really great midwife practice in town. And actually, one of our family friends had already recommended them
Yeah.
before. Like when I was already pregnant and I was already established and everything, but they're like, you should try them, because we told them how we were sort of like uneasy about seeing so many OBs and stuff. And they're like, you should, like, if it doesn't work out, call them. And so we did. We called them. We literally like they're like, come on over, just come in and talk to us. They took us right away. They took all of our records, no problem, no fuss, no nothing. And funny enough, when it came down to delivering, we actually didn't even have one of the midwives deliver. It was one of the hospital OBs because our midwife got tied up in another delivery case. And it was actually yeah. But I mean, it just goes to show you like anything can happen. Um, but you just have to have faith and be confident in your education and your decisions based on that, because we really, and I'll tell you a little bit about our delivery, but you really have to almost stick to your guns, because they'll push and push and push and scare you
Mhm.
for nothing. And I told my husband, like, I know I'm healthy enough, I know I'm strong enough to deliver. and
Right.
and I really wanted to, and I think most people want to. I think most people that understand how it impacts a baby's health would want to
Yeah.
deliver naturally. And not everybody can. I was like, but if I can, I want to try.
Right. Right. There's different, and I totally agree with you. There are different people in different situations, and there are some people that do really have some, high risk situations where they absolutely need intervention. But I also agree that we're just not, unless you're actively interested in doing the research yourself, we're actually not that educated on the pregnancy and birth process and what not only what a mother goes through during birth, which like what we usually see is on TV or movies, right? Where it's like this scary thing and everybody's yelling and people are running around, and it's chaos versus like, okay, so what is happening physiologically to mom? What is happening physiologically to baby? Is that at all adjusted or interrupted or altered when you add external um, interventions, like let's say like Pitocin? What does that do to mom's physiology and to baby's physiology? And how does that impact the birth process? I don't know that that was never reviewed with me. And same thing with an epidural. Like, yes, it does alleviate discomfort and pain, but what is the impact of that to mom? And is there an impact to baby? Uh, and I just think these are really important things to go over before deciding, yes, absolutely, uh, I am going to consent to this intervention.
Right.
Anyway.
And it seems like a lot, like I said, they were pushing it so hard. They almost made it seem as if I didn't have a choice.
Right. Well, it sounds like they're like, well, so we're going to decide for you if you're going to get induced at 39 weeks, and don't worry, and then we'll decide if you need a C-section. It just sounds like they were trying to get you to be a backseat passenger in your own birth and delivery process.
In your own healthcare.
Yeah, and in your own healthcare. And I mean, thank goodness for being a PTA and being a practitioner yourself. And even though, that's not a physician, you still learn how to learn and ask questions
Right.
and not only be there for your patients and give them education, but you also know how to educate yourself. And it also, I think, and let me know if I'm projecting a little too far, gives you the confidence to ask other types of practitioners questions. Like,
Yes.
but why?
Yes.
But why?
And I think a lot of people, well, and I think I told my husband too, like I think a lot of it too is having the comfort level of speaking to
Mhm.
someone of that stature, because
Mhm.
I think a lot of
Absolutely.
people think a doctor is like up here. And
Mhm.
yes, I know that there's so many things that doctors know that I don't know, but I know there's so many things that I know that doctors don't understand.
For sure.
And there's many a time where I've had to school a doctor in my career,
Yeah.
and vice versa, and that's okay. And but there's a mutual respect of like, oh, okay, hold on, let's put a pause on it, and let's think about this and regroup, because you have one opinion and I have another, and we need to find a compromise here.
Right.
And especially when it comes to like your own care, and it was really interesting though, because just before I got pregnant, I was taking um, it was a pharmacological marketing course, and
Interesting.
I had started taking some classes at ASU, because I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just go back and finish this degree. And
Might as well.
I know, and so I took that course and I found it very interesting. And oddly enough, we had a case study about Pitocin. And
Mhm.
so I already had a really strong opinion about Pitocin because of
Mhm.
it. But then you're right. Like as a PTA, was like, I need to figure out everything I need to do this the right way. How much should I be exercising? What should I be eat? Like I said, I went and talked to my husband's aunt, and I just really wanted to do it the right way. And I read so many books about um, midwifery and the history of gynecological studies and obstetrics. And I did so much research and reading that I just knew that there was no reason if I was healthy enough that I shouldn't be given the opportunity to give birth naturally.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Because that was no small amount of effort, and I'm sure no small amount of time.
No.
And then also, like, to remember, you're still working full time on top of this,
Yeah.
right? And doing all of this. And then, and just for anyone who doesn't know about the world of physical therapy, but chart notes and physical therapy are very intense. So your day after you've worked your 8 hours or 9 hours or how many hours you're going to work, you go home and you still have tons of chart notes to do because physical therapy documentation requires a lot of detail, which means it also requires a lot of time. So I don't know any like they do exist. There are these unicorns, but most physical therapists that I know are documenting at home unless they have some sort of very high-tech documentation software that is totally different. That's a totally different tangent that is starting to come out. That's super duper cool. But no, most therapists are documenting at home. So
Yeah.
you're working full-time plus
Yes. Well,
and doing this research and reading. Go ahead.
and I was gonna say, don't forget driving to my patients' homes every
Oh
day
yeah, that's right.
because
You're
I
driving to
yeah, and I live super rural, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
my commute to my first patient's house is at least 45 minutes, and
yeah.
then I'm driving all day, 45-minute drive home. You
And
know,
there's no way you're documenting after your treatments because you're not
no,
documenting in their homes.
no, no,
Yeah.
and so yeah, it would be like get home, like make dinner really fast, and then sit down and do chart notes till my husband got back, and then boom, like go to bed, read a book. It was a lot, but yeah, no, I feel that I don't know that enough women do that. And I remember because I have two sisters, they
I
both
mean,
have
how many people honestly know how,
no,
right?
no,
You know, or know how to, and this is like one of the things that I get so excitable about is like, I just don't believe that enough, especially women, have enough resources. I mean, the first time, like you didn't know how to be pregnant, right? Because you were never around other pregnant people or women to help you navigate this and to give you some of their wisdom, right? So we're really isolated in this journey. And I read this once and I absolutely believe it, at least it was my experience. Usually the first delivery we experience is our own.
yeah,
So who are we going to talk to about, okay, what do I expect? What does it feel like? How do I know when is this baby about to come out? And so it's just one of those things where, and that's how actually one of the things I hope that this podcast offers is younger women or women in general who decide to have a baby to be like, oh, how do we navigate some of this? How can we find some of the resources? How do we get more educated? Because there's just not as much opportunity when you go seek care to get educated on the subject unless you have a really involved doula or a really involved midwife. And usually they'll sit down and talk to you. But in my experience, OBs and even hospital midwives do not have the time.
no, and like I said, it's also not super accessible. And
Right.
you talk about having other women around you. I have two sisters that both have kids.
Yeah.
Now I'm the middle child, so their kids are grown. Like their kids are like in high school, college, like they're out the door, they're
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
And my youngest sister had her daughter very, very young, and she didn't know very much. And they just did an induction, and she just thought that's what I do, whatever.
Right.
And my older sister, I asked her about her delivery because hers was a little bit more traumatic, and she was like, I didn't want to know anything. I was like, I don't want to know anything. I'm just going to show up, and they're going to tell me what to do, and I don't want to know anything. And some people have that attitude too, and that's fine.
Sure.
It just for me, again, somebody who's been in tune with their body their whole lives, and like I said, having been a bodybuilder, like I am very much like, okay, I need this right now, I need that right now, I need to do everything to optimize myself. I was like, I need to do everything to optimize my pregnancy. Now that also includes a lot of Dr. Pepper and cookies, but I wanted to have a good experience. I wanted to make sure that I set myself up for a positive birthing plan.
Right. Yeah. Good for you. So you have gone through this whole journey. You've seen a ton of OBs. You did eventually change to a midwife. Uh, you were able to deliver, it sounds like in a hospital, and then ended up having an OB deliver your baby. But you did get some of the care for the last 10 weeks-ish with the midwife. Tell me a little bit about that delivery process.
So, it was funny because my husband kept saying like, oh, I have this trip in at the end of June and we were due July 22nd. And I was like,
So
honey,
cool.
I was like, I don't know if you should go. And I remember our last meeting with our doula, I was kind of like, I was like, so Becky, do you think you should go on this trip at the end of June? And she's like, no. And he's like, oh, this is our first. It's never going to come in time, blah, blah, blah. And I remember like, I said, like, we bought this house
Mhm.
and I was like, we really, because our house was like brand new. It just got built and it was all white. And I was like, we should really paint before this baby comes because these white walls are going to get scuffed. They're going to get stained. So I got this hair up my butt that I needed to paint this house, nesting, I'm sure.
Sure.
And we had these painters from hell come in and destroy,
Mm.
and they got paint on their baby stuff. I mean, it was a nightmare. But we finally got them out of our house, and we had made the nursery into a storage room for all of our stuff that we were moving around as we painted because we finished the nursery a long time ago. And I was like, I have to start getting some of this stuff out of here and get like the bassinet put together and like everything. And at the time we had just gotten this little puppy. We got this little basset hound puppy when we moved here. And he was so cute. He was like my little shadow.
Yeah.
And so I was so big. I was so big. I was so heavy. And my husband has a whole wall of books that were just thrown into that nursery. So I just took a like a laundry basket and I would fill up all the books and I'd put my puppy in there. And then we'd slide it across back to his office. Like, and we did this like over and over for hours with all these books. And then I'd pick some up and he'd follow me around. And I got like my bassinet put together. I got the changing table ready. Like I made sure like we had everything in the car that we needed to go. Cause at this point we were just a few weeks out. Like we were like 2 or 3 weeks out from being due. And I remember I called my mom and she's like, how are you feeling? And I was like, I think I hurt my back, like lifting all those books today. And I mean, I was nonstop. I was like, I carried up my rocking chair up my stairs. Like I was just doing everything. So I was like, I for sure hurt my back. And she's like, get on your ball. Like that'll help. And the next morning I woke up because my husband got up and he like put the AC on blast. And I was so cold. And a lot of times in the mornings, I'd come down to the couch and sleep because it was more comfortable. So I walked down, turned down the AC, and got on the couch with the puppy. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "I need to go outside." And boom, my water broke. And like I had no idea. So I had been having contractions since the night before. I didn't realize they were contractions
Yeah.
because it was like just muscle spasms, you know. Like I was like, for sure, I hurt my back. And I called my doula because I remember she was like, if you're not having contractions, if they're not strong enough, if they're not close together enough, they're gonna make you stay there. You're not gonna be able to eat. She's like, so call me if your water breaks. So I did. And I called my good friend Jess, who's also a doula. And I was like, what do I do? And I told my husband and he was so excited. He's like, all right, yeah, we're having a baby. And I was like, all right, we're having a baby. But but I wasn't having very strong contractions. And so I was like, I think this is going to be a while. And that morning, I already had, because I was 38 weeks and I had a 38-week checkup due. And I was supposed to go in that morning. So they called me. They're like, hey, can we reschedule you? I was like, actually, I think my water broke. And they're like, oh, go to the hospital. And I was like, okay. They're like, well, no, don't worry. They're like, take your time, take a shower, pack your bag, do whatever you got to do. If you're not having contractions, just take your time. So I was like, okay, cool. And I did everything. I have pictures of like my husband was taking of the dog doing yoga poses with me, walking up and stairs, like doing everything, doing the baby shifting, like everything. And they just weren't coming. And they started to come quickly for about an hour. And it was like they were all maybe 6 minutes apart. And then they would go away. So I got a phone call from the midwives. And they're like, hi, we heard your water broke and you're not at the hospital yet. So this is 6 hours later. They were a little bit pissed. And I was like, yeah, I was like, I just not having contractions. And like, okay, well, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, okay. So I called our doula. I was like, okay, they're making me come in. She's like, yeah, she's like, maybe a good plan. So she's like, at least they can check out and see how far along you are. And I remember I went in there, I was like, hi, my water broke. And I was just so chill. I was like, whatever, you know? And even our friend showed up to come watch the dogs while we went to the hospital. And he's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I'm great. And he's like, are you sure you're having a baby? I was like, I don't know. So we got to the hospital and they hooked me up and they're like, oh, yeah, there's a contraction. I was like, oh, that's a contraction? I was like, okay, like, who knew? They were so mild. And this girl showed up next to me and she is screaming
Oh,
bloody murder. And they made her go home. Like
oh,
yeah, she wasn't like dilating or anything. I was like, oh, and I looked at my husband and I was like, I'm not that bad. Like they're gonna make us go home. And he's like, they can't, your water broke already. So I was like, okay. And we we got admitted and they let me wait it out a while. Like maybe another couple hours, but they were like, it's been too long since your water broke. We have to start some Pitocin. It's just too risky now. And so I talked with the doula. She's like, I agree. She's like, you're not making any progress at this point. And, you know, now we are getting, because it was like the 12-hour mark. They're like, we're getting too far into that infection territory. So we made the decision to do the Pitocin. I labored for like 10 hours with Pitocin with my water broken, which is no fun feat. Um,
that's intense. So you've been in labor for 12 hours. Now you have Pitocin, another 10 hours. How is that different? Like, how was laboring
with
before the Pitocin, and then what was your experience afterwards?
So it was very mild
Yeah.
before, very mild. Like it honestly just felt like, you know, like my back was like seizing, you know, like, um, and I could tolerate it.
Mhm.
But once they gave me the Pitocin, so they started it out very slowly was the other thing is they did it very slow.
Yeah.
And once, and I wasn't dilating. That was the problem is that throughout all this process, I wasn't dilating. And then they got it pretty high up. And at that point, it like, it just felt like I was being torn in half. And I was, you know, my husband was like, you were writhing in pain, like writhing in pain. And I was only like, I want to say by the time they gave me the epidural, I think I was only about 5 or 6 centimeters dilated after being on it for like 10 hours. And I told my husband and I told the doula, I was like, I don't have the energy to go through with labor.
Mm,
I'm in so much pain. Like, I'm not going to have the energy to push. I'm
sure.
not. And because when your body's in pain, your body's actively working really hard to overcome that pain.
Sure.
And I couldn't relax anymore. And they were trying to get me to breathe. But the problem was the contractions were just right on top of one another. I wasn't getting a break anymore and not dilating. You know, we kind of realized like it's just we're going to be making slow progress here, and I just couldn't take the intensity that the Pitocin brought on with it. So again, at the 10-hour mark, we, you know, I was like, just I'm going to have to do an epidural, and we did the epidural. They gave me a break from the Pitocin so I could sleep for a few hours. They gave me like a 4 hour break. Um, and one of the reasons that we actually decided to deliver in a hospital was because I have very low blood pressure naturally,
Hmm.
very, very low.
Hmm.
And I've had episodes where I just pass out.
Hmm.
And I told my husband that's my worst fear is if we're in a birthing center and my blood pressure drops for whatever reason, like I'm very scared. And we would be 20, 30 minutes away from the nearest hospital.
Yeah.
So I was like, I think we should just do it in a hospital. So they let me sleep for about 4 hours. They they had only given me like one bag of fluids throughout the night,
Hmm.
like before.
Hmm.
And like they never replaced it from when I came in. And they had me sleeping up on an incline all night and they came in to check me in the morning, dropped me flat, and I was dehydrated and overworked at that point.
Yeah.
And they came and checked me and they left me flat. And then they started walking out.
Were
And
you on
I,
your back?
huh?
Were you flat on your back? Okay.
And I just started feeling like because you start to feel like the cold sweats and like, you know, like you just feel like you're like something's coming. And I was like, I told my husband, I was like, Ben. And he was fast asleep because it had been such a long night for him too. And my doula heard me and she got him up. And I was like, I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out. They came and they took my blood pressure. I still remember to this day, it was 68 over 35.
Whoa.
It
Okay.
was, it was the scariest thing. And they started panicking, and my husband, they were like, get a room ready, blah, blah, blah. Like they were like ready to like roll me out, do a C-section. And my husband was like, no, you're not taking her anywhere. Give her some fluids. Give her some fluids. He's like, she has low blood pressure. Give her some fluids. And I was so grateful because they were ready. Like they were ready to roll me out. They were taking the bed, and they gave me something to bring up my blood pressure because also baby's heartbeat was going down.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so they gave me something. They refilled my fluids, and then I was fine. Like then I was fine. It was like there was nothing wrong. It was like an episode, and what happens when you bring someone abruptly up and down. We
Yes,
know
yes. There is a yes, you
there's
can
a
the blood
reflex.
pressure drop moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is what surprises me when they're like, and then they dropped you. And I was like, oh, okay. So knowing that you naturally have low blood pressure and then they changed your incline suddenly.
Very sudden. And I was up,
Yeah,
like I was literally sitting up all night sleeping or for the 4 hours or
yeah.
whatever. And man, and it was still long. It was still really long
So at this
before I
point, how many hours had it been since your water broke? Because they were concerned at the 12-hour mark, right? So how many hours are you now?
that was like 24 hours at that
Holy
point.
moly. Okay.
That was 24 hours. And they were still like, you guys, we should really think about a C-section, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And they kind of kept scaring me. And they were like, I was started running a little bit of a fever at that point. And they said, we'll give you some Tylenol and an antibiotic right now. And I was like, okay, then let's do that. And they're like, but if this continues, we should really think about a C-section. And I asked my doula, she's like, your baby's not in trouble. She's like, he's fine. He's not in trouble. You're not in distress. There's no reasons. There's no valid reason still to do a C-section other than your water broke 24 hours ago.
So question, did your doula share this with you with anybody else present? Because I couldn't imagine her a doula, I assume a she,
Yeah.
a doula saying that with a physician right next to her.
No. I mean, this was like a discussion because they were like, we think you guys should consider a C-section. We'll come back later and see what you guys want to do.
Right.
And I mean, but she's like, and they're giving you the option.
Right.
So she's like, that means that you're not out of options. Once they tell you no, we're making this decision, you don't have a voice, like now baby's at risk.
Okay.
Now, so we felt pretty confident with that decision and we waited it out. And
So it really sounds like your doula was just telling you, just to make it a little bit clearer, was translating for you what the doctors were telling you. So she wasn't saying you should do this or you shouldn't do that. She was just saying, hey, this is what they said, just so you know, you still have decision-making power here because they're letting us know that your baby's not in danger yet because this is how they presented it to you.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and she said, if she's like, if there were a true danger, you wouldn't be given this option. And I said to my husband, like, that's really true. And I think it's also doctors get to a point where they just want to get it over with and be done. Because that's what it kept feeling like, like kind of like, okay, when are you guys going to give in? When are you guys going to give in? And I was fine. Like once they got
Sure.
my blood pressure back up and they gave me some water,
Yeah.
I was fine.
Yeah.
And it was just slow. I was just progressing so slow. And finally, we hit about I want to say it was 38 hours of labor.
Oh my gosh.
I was finally 10 centimeters and they were letting me push. And the midwife came in
So
originally.
much time.
Yeah, so much. I know. I really milked that time. I was like, nope, I'm gonna have this baby. And the midwife came in and she was so crazy. She gave us like the worst possible instructions for pushing. And she was having us do like a tug of war and I'm going to pretzel your legs now. And we're going to I was like, I'm doing yoga. Like what is happening right now?
Right,
Like, it
right.
doesn't make any sense. And then she got pulled away because there was like an emergency with one of the other patients and they were rolling her into like a C-section.
Okay.
So the OB that was on that day came in and took over our case. And that was fine. She was very wonderful. And um she gave me more clear instructions to push. However, she kept telling me to hold my breath and push. And that seemed very, I said to my husband, I was like, okay, as an athlete, that makes
Right.
sense to me. I was like, because I can't engage my core if I'm holding my breath, I'm going to pass out.
Right, right, right. Well, and that's also something like we never ever tell anyone to do. We never say hold your breath and squat. Really
Yes,
push down, hold your breath and squat.
like
Or
it
so that's called a Valsalva for
yeah,
anybody curious. And that's if you want to create artificial core stability by holding your breath and taking up space in your rib cage, but not actually engaging your muscles, that's how you do it. And so that's funny that that was the advice, and then your brain went off and went, but that's we never tell anyone to do it that way. So that's
no.
interesting.
And I was already stressed because I was like,
Yeah,
I can't do this. Like they're giving me all these crazy instructions and none of it makes any sense. And I
right.
feel myself pushing. And she said, okay. She's like, okay, let me think about this. So you can't feel yourself pushing. I said, no. And she was like, okay, let's turn down your epidural.
Yeah.
She's like, you need to feel these contractions because I couldn't feel the contractions. I couldn't feel my core, nothing. Um, and I said to my husband, I was like, I just need to feel myself push because I know I can get my core to do this work.
Right.
And and I had been doing, a lot of prep work, a lot of like I had been doing vacuums, I had been doing like bracing and everything to prepare for labor. So I was like, I know I can do this if I can just feel my muscles. So she turned it down and it was a game changer. It was such a game changer. And she was like, okay, hold your breath and push. And I was like, whatever, lady. I was like, I got this. And I was just like,
I
okay,
love
I'm going to
that.
do it. I'm going to push. And I started pushing and boom, he was coming. And then finally they were like, okay, okay, hold on. They're like, stop. They're like, he's stuck. And so I did not have, she was like, you don't have enough space. You're already tearing. So
Totally.
she was like, we can do a snip and get him out. She's like, it's been so many hours of labor. We need to get him out. And, my husband and I were like, yeah, do it, whatever, get this baby out. And literally, it was like one push, he just like popped right out. And
Amazing.
it was amazing. And, it just felt so validating that I knew what was best for me in that moment because they give you such, and I'm just like, where, like the whole hold your breath and push, like that doesn't even make sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. And I think about women who don't have the same training as you or I do,
Right.
and
Right.
maybe don't do core exercises to prepare for birth and stuff. And it's
Right.
just what chance do they have? They're going to get stuck with the C-section.
I mean, if I was to do a shameless plug for physical therapy for and during or like before pregnancy and then during pregnancy to like teach you some of these things, I think that would be very valuable. But no, you're absolutely right. Like people don't know what resource to go to, and I bet you 99.9% of people, tragically, like this is tragic, wouldn't ever think to visit a physical therapist to get prepared to deliver a baby. And I can't think of a more medically valid reason to go to physical therapy and to learn breathing techniques and I had the opportunity to work with lots of like I'm not a pelvic floor physical therapist, but I definitely got to work with a lot of pregnant women during my practice, and I can't tell you how many of them, especially towards later parts of their pregnancy, no longer could do a sit to stand from an average height chair. And what people don't realize is that shouldn't be challenging. It'll be different. Like it'll be challenging because now your body is different
Yeah,
and and your technique might have to be adjusted slightly. But should your body be absolutely strong enough? Oh yeah. Like should you be able to get up off the floor without your hands as a pregnant person or pregnant lady?
yeah, and
Uh, deep into your pregnancy? Yes. But a lot of people don't realize what is common versus what is normal.
yeah, and I think I'm so grateful. And when you and I first talked, we touched a little bit about on,
Yeah.
waiting till you're older because you have more courage, to speak up for yourself. You have more knowledge to ask the right questions. And again, I think that having my PT background, even though I wasn't a pelvic floor therapist,
Right.
um, was invaluable because I understand the body mechanics that go into pushing for labor.
Right.
Um, Probably better than some OBs. You know, it,
Oh, for sure.
especially after hearing that, I was like,
For
what
sure. Well,
do you mean?
yeah. I mean, OBs have a very specific specialty, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to forgive them their education, because how many women are in a hospital generally delivering on their backs when after doing like my homework and research into delivery, that's actually not an optimal position for delivering a baby. Actually, it puts you in a position to make it harder to deliver. It's easier if you're in on all fours. Almost said quadruped, but
Yeah.
on all fours or on your side with
Yeah.
your knees actually in and your ankles away from each other to open your pelvis. But I didn't learn that until I actually started diving into this stuff just on my own to be like, what are optimal positions for being able to deliver a baby? But if you don't know better and you all your only experience is seeing people on their backs with their feet in stirrups, you think that's optimal, but it's really not.
It's not. And you know, what's really, and I mean, the reason that I held out so long for an epidural was
Right,
because I knew exactly that. Because I knew once I got an epidural, that was going to
right,
be the only option was to be on my back to deliver because you can't
right,
your body, you can't get out of bed.
right. You can't move.
No. And
Yeah,
so it was really, it felt like a defeat to have to get the epidural. However, I understood at that point, like I just legitimately did not have the physical capacity to endure more pain. And I was not going to be able to let my body relax enough to actually dilate or even deliver because when you're in that much pain, you can't concentrate anymore. And you have to be very alert when you're delivering.
yeah. And don't I'm sad that you feel that way because I don't think anybody who's ever had an epidural or Pitocin or anything, that's not a defeat. That is just a tool that you chose to use. And my only thing is that I think people are given more or less amounts of education to help them make the best decision for themselves. But did you absolutely have informed consent? Did you know exactly what you were doing when you were doing it? Absolutely. So was it a defeat? No, it was a strategic decision made by you in a
Yeah.
very stressful moment so that you could be successful. So I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I don't, I mean, I don't think so at all.
Yeah.
My
No,
opinion about that matters, but
yeah, I think
yeah,
it's
it's just a thing. It's just a tool, and thank goodness
yeah.
we have access to it.
Well, and I think we all kind of have this very romanticized idea about how labor is going to go and how beautiful it's going to
Mhm.
be. And the reality of it sets in is that you don't really have any control. You're right, like you don't have any control, and you have to make the best decisions at the time for your health and your baby's
Yes.
health. And that's really the most important thing is that we made a decision that gave us a healthy baby boy in the end. But yeah, it was 40 hours of labor. It was super fun, and
Yeah, sounds great.
I know everybody was like uh they let you go 40 hours ago.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was like touching on one of the things that we talked about earlier. I think that when you like, and I felt the same way, like when you're just a little bit older and you've had a little bit more life experience, you have a little more confidence in your own decisions and that you were able to trust your body and say, and you were able to say when even after people were really encouraging you to go down a cesarean section route, you're like, no, it's not, I'm not at that point yet. So I'm going to say no and I'm going to keep trying this because you knew for you what was best. And then you had your doula able to translate what the doctor's recommendations were, which was really nice. Again, a plug for doulas. So good for you. So the reason they let you is because you weren't going to be told what to do. You were going to be advised. And then you were going to make the right decision for yourself. And that's what your healthcare team is. They're your advisors to help you make a decision.
Yeah, and I think another big part of it was that my husband was so involved with the pregnancy too, and he was very supportive of us attempting to have a natural delivery.
Yeah.
uh, and I mean, like I said, he was also a big advocate for me in the hospital.
Right.
And it's you have to have a support group when you go in, and everybody's on board with the plan, and everybody
Yeah.
understands, and people are there to support you the right way. Because I think he would have been the first if we were in even an inch from danger, he would have been like, like, we're done. You have
Right.
to have, you're done.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think it's also husbands like that are supportive are so huge, and
Yeah.
in what's going on with you.
Agreed. Agreed. And yeah, and so giving them the credit they deserve,
Yeah.
especially when they're in there and in it. So before we move on, because I don't want to like miss any piece of this story because I think it's so interesting and also so empowering. And then also like you knew all the things, you did your homework, and yet um at the same time, thank goodness the interventions that you did have were available. And
Mhm.
that's the thing, like just because you might have a goal of a vaginal delivery and maybe having a goal of being unmedicated, then in the moment realizing that just because maybe things don't work out the way that you had hoped they would, uh, still being grateful for the experience, but then also being grateful for the interventions that were
Mhm.
available when they were. So anyway, is there anything that about your birth story that you want to make sure we also capture before I ask you about transition into mom life after going your whole life as a independent person, working really hard, building a career and identity, and then shifting into this new role of mother?
No, I think that, I mean, it's a long birth story, but it encapsulates everything. And yeah, I just have to say, like, I would always advocate for getting a doula and finding a team of people that are able to help you carry out your birthing plan as best you can. I know so many women go in without a birthing plan, and
Mhm.
it's so important to have one, and for everyone to understand you know what the goal is, and the goal is to have a healthy baby.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So now you have a healthy baby boy that you were able to deliver. Congratulations. Uh, just shy of your 38th birthday.
Yeah.
So you did it. And now, so you're bringing your baby home. Did you think you were going to go back to work? Did you go back to work? Like, what was that transition like?
Yeah, so like I said, I left working home health right, I would say right around it was towards the later end of my pregnancy. Like I want to say around 30 weeks, I stopped working because I kept getting so sick and I couldn't see patients.
Yeah.
So it was just a home health job, and I was working on call, so it wasn't a big deal. And because I didn't want to set anything up permanently until we had the baby, so I didn't have to go on maternity leave and all this stuff. So we had thought, we'd actually thought a lot about it because I was probably going to continue doing home health, and we wanted to have flexible childcare. And I shared with you before, like we thought about having an au pair and all these things. Like we were already like planning for me to go back to work. Now, when my son was born, he failed his first hearing screening, and then that became the focus of his first few months, was trying to figure out what was going on. And my going back to work got kind of put on the back burner, and it kind of just didn't even come back up, and it hasn't for some time. um and so we were swamped with appointments. Like we were going to ENTs, audiologists. This poor little guy has been through so many tests and pokes and prods and everything in his first year. Like it's incredible. And so we found out that he was born with profound hearing loss, sensor neural hearing loss. And it took us a long time. I think it wasn't until February of 2024. Now, he was born in July of 2023. We didn't find out until February of 2024 the cause, because there's no hearing loss in our families, either one. And curiously enough, he was also born with the brightest blue eyes that we could not explain. And I mean, they're so piercing. They're just bluer than a blue that you could ever imagine. They're almost purple. And we were very dumbfounded by that. And my mom's like, "Oh, your great grandfather had blue eyes," and Ben's side said the same thing. And we're like, "Okay, sure." And being Mexican and my husband being half Arab, we were like, okay, we have a blue-eyed baby, like what the heck? And he's so beautiful, he's got my tan skin, he's got thick hair and these stunning blue eyes. You're just,
Oh,
this looks like a model. And he was adorable as a baby. So we went through this whole workup. And his pediatrician was really great in helping us navigate and get into all of these specialists early. I guess he had a college buddy um, that became the first surgeon in Florida to perform cochlear implant surgeries. So we had a little in, and we got him in at 2 months old to go see this surgeon to start the process of determining whether or not he was a candidate for cochlear implants. And I remember we met with him, and he gave us like, okay, this is what you're going to have to do. And we met with his audiologist, and she looked at me, she's like, how did you even get him in here so early? Like, because to get in to see him required that we do two studies that were over 2 hours long with him. And he was like a brand new baby, like he was like a month old when we did these. So we had to do these 2 hour hearing studies with him. We had to do ENT workups, we had to do lab work, everything. She's like, I don't even know how you got this done. And I literally would call every day, all of these places to find out, do you have a cancellation? Do you have a cancellation? And there's such limited providers for hearing loss for kids that everywhere was telling me it was like a 4 to 5 month wait to get in. So I just got on the phone every single day, called, that by the time he was 2 months old, we already had his first surgical consultation. And we met with this doctor who was really, really far away. He's in Gainesville, which is like 3 or 4 hours from us. And it was impossible to go there. And we didn't feel very comfortable with him either. He just didn't really give us the warm and fuzzies. And we got a doctor in Orlando, and we started the process with him of the consultation, and we met with his audiologist, and we really liked her. And it was just sort of like a snowball of like, okay, well, now we're starting audiology, now we're starting speech, now we're starting, and we had to trial like hearing aids, and we had to take him for MRIs, and it was so many things. We had to take him to genetic testing. And even to this day, now that we know what's going on, we've got cochlear implants, we've done the surgery and everything. I was trying to come up with a schedule for our new caretaker, and giving her an idea of what the schedule would be like. And I looked at my calendar, and I'm like, okay, so we have 10 to 15 appointments, medical appointments a month. And I'm like, it's a full-time job, and I don't know anywhere that would allow me to take 10 to 15 days off a month, because mind you, these are all medical appointments. They happen during business hours. So work became like a secondary thing for me that I'm just going to have to put it on hold until he's, in preschool, or, a little bit older in school, because right now he just requires so much support to get him up to a communication level of a child his age, because we're still not there.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a huge shift, because like I was telling you, I was working so much before, and like to also have such a life that was so self-centered in a way. I'm not going to say selfish, but self-centered, where it was like, this is what I want, these are my goals, blah 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 blah. It was really difficult to make that shift, as a new mom, not just as a new mom, but as a new mom with a child with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, because you realize like there is no more you for a little bit. And that's I think what's been a huge transition. But not to say that it's so hard to explain, I think sometimes, because I think some people will be like, oh, like that's so selfish, like it's your child. But no, I think it's really important for moms to have an identity, and for moms to have a way to connect with themselves too, because it just makes you a better mom.
Agree. Agree. because you still have to fill up your own cup.
Right.
It's just finding the balance, right? Of how do you do it in such a way that you're still physically and emotionally available for your child, and I think everybody strikes that balance a little bit differently, and everybody knows like what it is that their kid needs. And also kids need something a little different as they age, right?
Yeah.
So there's that.
There's that. And, I think it was also I mean, it's also a really hard transition just because you're going through,
Yeah.
um, you're going through the hormone shifts, you're going through, your body image shifts, you're going through, just a huge change. And for me, I think it was even more difficult because I was very isolated. And like if this would have happened in San Diego, I don't know if it would have been different, but I do know that I had a bigger support system. I do know that I knew the medical system and the resources out there a lot better.
Yeah.
Whereas here it was so much like, okay, I got to research. Okay, I got to figure this out. Okay, I got to figure that. And it was so stressful trying to find what we needed. And like I said, luckily just knowing how to get stuff done in a medical system was so invaluable. And even just understanding how insurances worked and all of those things where I could advocate for him and get him into the right providers.
Right. Right. And to make sure that he got what he needed. Well, that and also because you were saying earlier that like your husband's ability to also do research and advocate, right? And to make sure that your son got what he needed.
Yeah, no, and my husband, oh gosh, we like we make such a great team because,
Yeah.
so my husband, he's a physicist,
Mhm.
and um and he's a PhD. So his ability to research is like, surpasses mine by a million. But this is very strange. I've never heard of this before, but when you get cochlear implants, the companies court you. There's 3 companies that make them and they court you.
Okay.
And they call you and they sell you on their products.
Okay.
And all of them are the best and greatest ever,
Of course.
And you could ask your doctor, but they can't sway you one way or another. You could ask your radiologist and they can't sway you one way or another. So all these companies court you, and it was funny because they all know each other too. So they're like, oh, you're going to speak to so and so from this company and that company, and they'll tell you. What was really funny was we contacted Medell, the company that we're with now,
Yeah.
and the girl was so sweet, and she was like, we heard about you guys. I was like, what? She goes, yeah. She's like, we heard about you guys that we're going to need to release some white papers to you. And we were like, oh, well. So, my background being in rehab, and I did specifically neuro for many, many years. I have a good understanding of how, what it takes for neuroplasticity to happen and how we develop, our sensorineural, processes and balance and all these things. And very specifically, my son has under development in his canals, in his semicircular canals. So he's going to have some balance deficits. Sometimes that also includes balance deficits after the surgery as well. So it was like, I had a lot of questions, a lot of very medical detailed questions. And then my husband had a lot of technology questions. So it was funny because they were actually very accommodating, and they allowed us to correspond with their PhDs and in their research. But they were just like, oh, we heard about you guys, because a lot of the feedback that we got was that, oh, most parents are just asking us about the colors available.
Right.
And I
Right.
was, no, we really wanted to know. We wanted to know about the technology. We
Right.
want to understand what, what the equipment does and how it does it and what's going to work best for our son. And one of the reasons that we went with the company that we did is that they actually will do a mock-up of our son's ear canal and his cochlea, and they will perfectly fit the electrodes to all the like nerves, like I guess like they'll line it up to all the nerves so that
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so the electrodes actually hit all the right frequencies. So we're like, yeah, that's what we want. And
Yeah.
then and then they came back to us and they're like, I'm sorry, we can't perform it because your hospital doesn't have the technology. And we threw a fit. We threw a fit.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what do we have to do to make this happen?
Right.
I mean, I literally was on the phone with the company for weeks, and we got the hospital to agree to do some like back end deal to use one of the CT scan CDs that we had to set it up. And I mean, it was a big deal. But again, like, I don't know how many parents are able to advocate for their kids that way. And it's like I said, had I been younger, would I known all these things? Had I, would I know to push for this? Would I know to ask for this? No. And it's like every day I think I'm just a better mom for having all this life experience and all this career experience and all this, and like my background in the medical field.
Yeah.
So I think I feel like, especially for having a kid with disabilities, it it's giving me so much better of a perspective of being a parent to be an advocate for him. But then also it's made my parenting so purposeful, because although feeling like I'm missing something in my career, I feel like I'm making such a huge difference in raising this little human that I don't know that he could have another mother. You know what I mean?
Yes. Which is really quite beautiful, right? Like, and is the belief that you are the best mom for your baby.
Right.
And
Right.
I hope every mom feels that way, that they are the best mom for their baby. Even though I mean, I don't know about you, but early on when I first had my daughter, I was like, what? I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my God. I felt so inadequate. So to hear you say that, like, I'm the best mom for my baby because of all these reasons, like, not only do you have like the mental space and emotional space, but you also have the technical background, and your husband has the technical background to be able to advocate for him medically while you both are being intentional
Yeah.
for him as parents. Like, that's unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's hard to, like, it's not easy to take a step back and put my career on hold, but
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, right? Like, being accomplished, doing all these things, and then, and taking a step back, which is what I would say too. But yeah, so what is that like? How has that shifted your identity? Has that been an easy shift, or are there still times that you wrestle with it? Like, what is your experience around that?
I think it's hard because it's almost like there's days I forget. There's days that I really forget, who I was, what I did. And then, like my brother-in-law will call me and be like, "Hey, Anna, like I hurt my back on this biking trip. Like, what should I do?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's easy. You just blah 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 blah."
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll be like, "Wait, do I know that? Do I really? Okay, oh no, I do know that." And but it's interesting because, like I said, I've found so much purpose in who I am with who I was, and it's giving me so much empowerment to be a better mom. But yeah, it's hard some days, because I feel like there's a lot of times I feel very guilty that I'm not providing for our family, and we have, and not that we're not struggling. No, by no means. My husband has a great job, and it's so wonderful that I can stay home, and we're so fortunate that we're in a position that I can do this. But I do feel guilty that I can't provide. I do feel like I wonder I worry about like where I'm going to land in a career after taking so much time off. I know it's not as big of a deal anymore, but it still feels like a big deal sometimes.
Sure.
Um, and I feel like I'm losing skills, and that's a little bit difficult because when you're not around it every day, you lose it. Like I remember working in the hospital. I could spew off so many like things like off the top of my head, like from pharmacology to vitals to protocols to, I mean, like everything. And now I'm
Right.
like, huh?
Or knowing the lab values, like being able
Yes,
to glance and be like, okay, I know exactly what these lab values mean without having to look up what the normals are, right?
I know. And
Yeah.
it was funny because the other day I got my own lab work done, and I was looking at it and I'm like, hold on, maybe I need to Google this one. And I'm like, why am I having to Google this stuff?
Right.
But
It's true, because if you don't practice it
you lose
all
it.
day, every day, it does fade.
Yeah. And I started thinking about, I used to, like I said, I used to train the corpsmen,
Yeah.
and I remember one time somebody's like, it's like you walk in and like he said to me, he's like, it's like you can just spot every obstacle and like everything that's a safety hazard. Cause I would just walk in and start moving stuff around and blah, 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 blah.
Yep. Yep.
And, and then, we'd like take the patient's vitals and I'm like, oh no, I already got them up here. And I'm like, I don't think I could do that anymore. I'm like, I can barely remember what I walked into the room for or
Right.
where my keys are or my credit card. Like, I don't
Well,
know where that brain capacity went to.
uh, the brain capacity went to all of the things that you're paying attention for your baby,
Yeah.
right? I bet you can read his body language, his mood, his breathing patterns, his movements, like all that brain power to went to those things. You're probably just redirecting it into being able to really identify what he needs and when he needs it and how he's doing. So you didn't lose it. It's just doing something different.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
assume, right? I'm not an expert, but I assume.
Oh,
And then if you were to like once he gets older and you no longer need that skill set and you brought it back towards, being able to do all the other things you did before, I believe it would come back.
yeah.
But you
I,
just
I
don't
hope
need those
so.
things right now.
Yeah, I hope so. No, I swear it's like mom brain goes on forever. And
It is a thing.
it's funny too because it was such an identity shift, I think, not only in becoming a mom, but then also moving across the country and going from a big city, going to a
Yeah.
rural area. Like there's been a lot, and being married, and it's just been a lot of really dramatic changes in just a couple years for me, that I feel like I haven't really taken a breath to catch up with it. But I think what's really great is that, my husband's been very supportive, and, we've gotten help. Like we have a babysitter right now that comes a couple days a week to just give me some downtime. I mean, a lot of it turns into just doing stuff around the house and catching up, but she's here to give downtime, and soon we'll have full-time childcare. Um, and that'll be really fantastic. And I think also the difficulty for us has been we know our son cannot go to daycare yet. He still has communication barriers, and he has very expensive equipment on his head all the time that makes it very difficult for us to just be like, here you go.
Go play with all these other children.
Yeah, so
Please don't break it.
yeah, it's been hard to
Yeah.
find something that works for us, and we finally decided that we are hosting an au pair so that we have one-on-one care for him, so that I can do the things that I need to do. And I've decided to go back to school, and I think that that's going to give me a little bit more of my identity back, because I was reading something that talks about how being a stay-at-home mom is the equivalent of like a couple full-time jobs, and it is. And it's the isolation of it, because there's days when it just really seems like it's easier to stay home than to go out and go be social, go meet people, because there's days where there's just a mental exhaustion that you can't bring yourself to do one more thing, because going out means, okay, let's pack the diaper bag, okay, let's get the car seat ready, okay, let's get the stroller. And it's so many things that you're checking off this mental list that it's just adding to that exhaustion, that the price that you pay isn't worth the return on investment sometimes, and it's very difficult. Um, so I think that, um, I think a lot of times you're, I tell my husband, it's like, it's hard because the one thing that changed for him is that he became a father. He still got to keep his career. He still has friends. He still has, opportunities to socialize. Whereas for us, it's such a dramatic change in going from being very type A, very, go, 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 that it makes you shift your personality in a way that you never did it intentionally. It was never your idea. So even though you're doing it for the right reasons and it makes you happy, it's not easy.
Yes. You have to put that so eloquently because you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's not that dads don't put in the work, and it's not that it's just it's a different experience and journey for men, and they don't, the demands on them, I'm not belittling at all, but they are just different. And they still can still do some of the things that they used to do prior to parenthood more easily than I feel like I could. Like
Yeah,
it sounds like you can. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's a shift. And sometimes it's hard.
it's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
because, as someone that I've always made very intentional,
Yeah.
even dramatic shifts in my life,
Yeah.
I've been in control of it. I've been the one that, sets the boundaries of that change. I'm the one that sets the timing of those changes. But now you're totally out of control. And as someone who was very type A before, it's very, very difficult for me to just be like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
Like
like just surrender to it, right?
yeah. And then I mean, it's also just so many of the physical changes because again, like as somebody who was so fit, oh my gosh, I and not like not to be like, oh, my body, but I was like I could just pick up and like go run a couple miles, and I could, like I would just add on like 100 burpees at the end of my workout, like somebody that was just so physically like just
Capable.
capable. Yes,
Yeah.
capable. Oh man, I am so humble. I'm so humbled right now. Like even now, I feel like I'm getting back there, but like to just do a couple push-ups is a struggle. To just do a pull-up is a struggle. And it's just like it kills me because I worked so hard. I worked so hard. And I know I can get back there. And I know it's kind of like almost like a humble brag, like, oh, I'm getting back into it now, or I was able to do it before. But those were hard things that I worked to get to, and it just all gets taken away in one fell swoop. And there's so many women that are capable to stay super fit during their pregnancies, and like props to them. I was so fit and I couldn't do it.
Yeah. It's just a different experience for everyone.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It is humbling because no longer, like, once you have a baby, you just don't have the same amount of time to commit to it either.
No. No, and
And you have
and
to forgive yourself for that.
yeah, and I think that my husband's like, oh, he's like, I don't have time to get a full workout in, and I'm like, my husband was, being in the military, and same thing, like he was super high level too, and um it, it's hard for him to also make the shift. It has been hard for him to make the shift of I don't have an hour to work out every day and do 10 programs in a week of different training.
Right.
And like what I've resolved to is if I get 20 minutes in a day, I'm happy. If I get 20 minutes in, a couple times a week, that's an accomplishment.
Yep.
And that's what you have to do because it is a huge accomplishment. And
It is.
I think one of the biggest things for recovery too was moving because you're so big, you can't move. When baby comes home, you're in this position all day. You know what I mean?
I do.
You're in this position all day and you're not
Yep.
moving. And
Right.
I mean, and I think as being older, I almost feel like it's been tougher to recover because I feel so stiff all the time. And because I was so immobile for those months.
Right. Yeah. It is just different. It is a different beast. And then, yeah. And then I'm sure you have it in the back of your mind, like you have to maintain strength. You have to continue strengthening to maintain strength because after you get to a certain age, your strength just decreases just
Right.
because that's just what happens. And the way you maintain strength is by continuing to use it and not being able to use it at the frequency that you would like or push yourself to the level that you would like in order to maintain strength. So that way you have mobility and capability in your late 50s and 60s and 70s, right? Because you're not just working out to work out now because it feels good. You're
Yeah.
working out to work out now to go up and down the stairs by yourself when you're 80 and to
Yes.
get in on a bed by yourself when you're 80 and 90 years old and so it's also like an investment in your physical future, in your independence, and at least that's how I feel about it. So it's challenging, but yes, also the same thing where you're like, if I get it in there at least a couple times a week, or I do something at least for a short period of time, or if I pretend my baby is a kettlebell and I do burpees with her, burpees, kettlebell swings. Those are different things.
Yeah,
Like giving yourself credit for when you can squeeze whatever in.
right.
And dedicate the time the same way you used to.
And and I think it's also like it's not just even about like the future, but it's like the foreseeable future, like keeping up with him, once he's older,
Yes.
running around and he wants to get thrown around. And you know what I mean? It's all those things too that I think about. And I mean, I'm so grateful that I was in the best shape of my life when I got pregnant.
Yes.
Because I literally feel like that was like the pinnacle of my fitness was when I got pregnant, because I can't imagine being out of shape at that age and getting pregnant and then trying to recover and lose
So
the weight.
hard.
I mean, I think I had such a solid foundation. It wasn't quick, but I have to say, like, the baby fat just melted off of me. Like, it literally just came off from the little bit that I was doing. And I think that has everything to do with where I was at before and the discipline that I had already. And just the fact that I had a healthier lifestyle mindset already.
Yeah.
you know, it took me a full year to lose the weight, but I'm like, it took me 9 months to put it on. I don't
Sure.
think it's reasonable to give myself a full year to get back there. And I didn't really put a lot of pressure on myself either. Like I said, I was like, if I get 20 minutes in, great. If I don't, I don't.
That's right. Good. See, I think you have a really beautiful attitude around that.
I mean, it took me a little bit to get there because at first I was like, I need to work out. I need to work out. But also it's just like, man, it's just having the that those 20 minutes to yourself to have them, to just think about your body, what your body's doing, your body moving. It's meditative, right? Because as a mom, your brain is going a million miles a minute, that having that time to focus on yourself, where you're just focusing on movement, just focusing on breathing, it's such a good way to like cleanse your head and be a better person for baby when you're done.
Agreed.
And I think a lot of moms are like, oh, it's so selfish, you're working out, blah blah blah. But it's not. It's like the best thing you can do for your kid, and have them see you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe even make it fun. So
Yeah,
that way, hopefully, maybe they might one day think it's fun too.
exactly. Because I mean, they mimic everything you do.
Yeah. So
Everything.
Anna, any takeaways or anything that you're like, you know what, but if there was one thing that just really that stands out to you, or that you would want to make sure your younger self knew, or that you would want another mom considering having a baby, younger or older, to keep in mind, what would that thing be? What would that piece of knowledge that you wish you had that you'd love to deliver?
I think that there's I think society puts such a negative connotation on having kids older, but I are waiting, and I think that you have to really wait till you're ready. You have to really wait, until, and you're not going to feel ready per se, but I think that when you've had enough life experience, when you've gotten all those things out of the way that you wanted to do, travel, your career, or just even moving, whatever it is, like you've gotten some things out of your system. And I think that that's when you're ready to be a parent. When you feel like you're a whole person is when you're ready for a relationship, when you're ready for, a partner that is willing to have children with you. Like, I think that there's not a limit. And the other thing that I would say too is that, you know, parenting is it's such an important thing. It's such a huge thing that I like now looking at kids is so different. And I would say you want to be the best person you can be when you become a parent, because it's just you're molding someone's life and you're putting this person out into the world. And it's really changed my perspective on so many things in life, and in a good way, in a positive way, but it just gives you so much more respect for other parents and for moms that have done this and people that make it look easy.
For sure.
Then
For
there's people
sure.
like you're like they're making it look easy, but like in the back of your head, you're like, I know, I get it, yeah.
Anna, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. This was unbelievably incredible. I loved going on this journey with you, and just thank you so much for coming on and being willing to share.
No, thank you so much for letting me share. It feels good to like be like, yeah, like I have this cool story, because being a mom doesn't always feel cool, but I think it's nice to have other moms look at stories, because nobody, it's like I used to always tell my patients, uh, progress isn't linear. And I think the same thing moms should know, progress isn't linear. That you continue to become a better person for your kids, and that everyone's journey is so different. You can't compare yourself. And maybe somebody might relate to this in one spot or not relate to it in another. But I think that more moms should be open about their stories, because everybody has such a unique story, and you can learn so much from every mom.
Oh my gosh, I agree. I think we can learn so much from every mom and every experience.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank
And
you
I
so
can tell you how much I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.